Hello and Merry Christmas. If this is your first time tuning in with us, we are so grateful that you're here. This is a huge, warm welcome. We never take it for granted when you choose to make time and prioritize being in church. We know that Christmas is such a busy season. We've been feeling it. This is one of our busiest times of the year as the Salvation Army. We have multiple campaigns going on. So we really appreciate it when you take the time to tune in and just be intentional about your time with God. So whether you're watching this in the car on the way to work, if you're watching it on a Sunday morning with your family, or maybe if you just clicked the link because you saw it on social media, whatever the case, we are so glad that you're here. So welcome. My name is Emma. I'm on staff here at the church, and you'll probably see me doing youth and kids programming, but I also do a lot of the behind the scenes stuff like editing and social media graphics. It's an honor to get to preach tonight. We are doing an awesome series called Rediscover Christmas, and I've personally found that it's been so timely and so relevant to everything that we've been going through this year with COVID and just a completely different kind of Christmas this year. So I hope it's been blessing you. But I have a little story to tell you. Please don't judge me. We're all human. I'm just trying to keep it real with you. Truthfully, I have not always enjoyed driving. Driving has been something that I've always struggled with. I've just had anxiety because I've always recognized the huge responsibility it is to, one, operate a machine that costs so much money, and two, the fact that it can injure myself and others if I'm not careful. And so those are two things that I've just really, carried with me as I venture into driving and getting my license and that whole part of life. But I can honestly say that now, as a 21-year-old, after many years of driving and figuring it out, for the first time, I think, I'm actually starting to enjoy road trips, long drives. I'm kind of getting the hang of it. I'm not too afraid of it anymore. I'm starting to enjoy it more than not. And here's the thing. I've had multiple bad experiences with one specific type of vehicle, white trucks. And it's just that white trucks are the bullies of the highway. And I've had multiple experiences on my own, but also with my sister. And in one specific instance, we were driving home, we were on the highway, and all of a sudden, two white trucks come speeding up behind us out of nowhere, and I'm really getting stressed out, and then one of them just cuts us off, and I'm like, why is it always white trucks? I don't understand. Why is it always they're just, come on, why is it always white trucks? And I turned to my sister, I'm like, this is so annoying, it happens all the time, and she's like, I know, it's something about the white trucks, and I'm like, it's almost like they have this energy, white truck energy. And then that became the joke for a few weeks after that, is every time we'd be on the road together or every time I was by myself, it just became this habit of white truck energy, bullying people on the road, what is going on? Road rage, hello. And I know that some of you are probably like, Emma, you can't just blanket all white trucks, okay? And I understand that, I know that, but it became a little habit, okay? It became a fun little joke. Not all white trucks are bad. I'm not discriminating. It was just a joke. And then one day I was driving home from a photo shoot, and it was with a really sweet family. And anyway, I was almost home, and then sure enough, a white truck pulls up behind me, and I'm like, here we go again. This habit where I'm like, ugh, a white truck, seriously? And I just felt God be like, I need you to stop saying that. I need you to stop. And immediately I got defensive, and I was like, God, it's just a joke. What do you mean? We're just kidding around. It's just white truck energy. It's just funny. And he was like, no, it's actually disunifying. And that sentence, it's disunifying, really struck with me. And it really kind of struck a chord in all the other areas that I've maybe been disunifying people or groups because of something that bothers me. And so I kind of started to pinpoint all these situations and moments where I did not fight for peace and where I actually was bringing disunity, where I would see people as enemies instead of partners. And it is so easy in 2020 to be pit against each other, right? Like politics, money, pride, pretty much all of it. It doesn't take a lot for us to get upset with other people. And the thing is, that actually comes really natural to us. Like, it's not our instinct to forgive right away, but it's easy to be angry and be upset and hold a grudge. And so as Christians, we're actually called to go against our flesh, go against what feels natural and normal. And if we want to honor and glorify God in everything we do, that includes unity. Unity is a huge part of God's plan for us and for his eternal purpose in heaven, that we would actually be united with him. How cool. But this is the thing that God cares so much about, that he would make it a thread throughout the entire Bible. The Old Testament, the New Testament, the death, the resurrection, the Christmas story even. God cares so much about unity. And so we're going to kind of unpack that today. As a quick recap, the definition of Advent means coming or arrival. And the season is marked by expectation, waiting, anticipation, and longing. As many would say in 2020, the advent of your Amazon package will be there soon. The coming of something, the anticipation. Advent is the build-up and the anticipation of Jesus' birth. It is linked to the past, the present, the future. It's completely rediscovering Christmas and actually rediscovering ourselves. And so if you've been a part of our church for any amount of time, you know that every year we do a kids' Christmas pageant, and they are spectacular. We have all these kids come in, and we start prepping months in advance. We get costumes. The kids have to memorize lines. They go home, and they play these CDs through their house all day long. Drives their parents crazy, but we love you guys. And then they come in, and we do dress rehearsals, and it's this huge, long thing, and there's a cast. And the cast list is all these kids in our church that are super talented. They sing, they read lines, they do whatever. And it can be so easy for us in the century that we live in to kind of like glamorize and Hollywood the Christmas story. Because all we see is like these videos of people dressed in robes, right? And we're like, okay, a cast. But the thing is, when we read the Christmas story, we have to remember that those are actual people that had real relationships. Just like you might know a stepdad and a stepmom and family members and social cultures and different norms. That was real life. This wasn't just a cast role. But God did use some pretty interesting characters in the Christmas story. And so that's what we're going to look at today. We're going to look at the people that God chose to be there at the birth of Jesus. And so the birth of Christ brings together a very unique group of people. We start in order in Luke with Zechariah and Elizabeth, and that is the parents of John the Baptist. And then we move over to Mary and Joseph, and we're introduced to them, two of the main characters, some would say, of the birth of Jesus. Kind of important. You kind of need Mary for the story. And then we meet the shepherds and the angels. And so the angels come, which is kind of like a spiritual meets like humanity type of moment. And we kind of get this glimpse of all of these angels joining in choir, and that they shouldn't be afraid. That the shepherds were afraid at first, and then they warmed up and they realized, okay, this is really happening to me. I guess I should get on board. And then as they journey to the stable, we're introduced to animals, of course, because they're in a kind of like Jesus is born into a feeding trough, and so there's animals in the stable. There's other people around in Bethlehem. And so who are these mysterious visitors from the east? The wise men traveled a very long, far way to come and worship the Messiah. At any rate, many scholars like to think that they were astrologers. Some people think that they came from China. The wise men were noble and wealthy men, and it actually was super symbolic of God bridging an even deeper divide between two social structures, because you have the wise men who are kind of like these very wealthy, very noble men who are way more esteemed than lowly shepherds who were dirty, who had kind of like the worst job that nobody wants they had to do, and as a result they maybe weren't the most kind people, in contrast to the wise men who were a bit more respectable and honorable. And as well, one of the biggest parts that is so foundational about the wise men is that they were Gentiles, not Jews, which just was going to show what God was doing through Jesus to bridge this gap, that God is actually for all people and not just the Jews. There were no Pharisees or Sadducees or priests or spiritual VIP people that were invited to the birth of Jesus. But the people who were invited, the wise men, were foreigners. They actually came and they traveled a far distance to worship the Messiah. And they didn't care that he was born to a teenager or that they were in a smelly barn. They just wanted to come and see him. And so to us, it kind of seems like an odd-looking bunch. But to the people of the day, to hear that Jesus was born in such lowly, unclean circumstances, that was blasphemous. That was not okay with them. They had prayed to God and they were asking for a savior. And what they expected was kind of something like David, that, he'd ride in with armor and money and wealth and riches, and he would oppress their enemies and defeat them. And Jesus just flips the script completely. He's born in a manger with not a lot of money, with teenagers, with smelly animals. We've been through all of this. He's born in the most humble, inclusive way possible. I guess the question is, could Jesus have united any more people just from his birth? And the answer is probably not. He pretty much covered them all. And so that brings us to our first point, which is Christ is love embodied. The Bible talks about love in many different places. Maybe you have a favorite romantic movie or novel that you like to read. In most recent movies, even in action movies, there's pretty much always a romantic storyline. Even in the Titanic, which was based on true events of a ship hitting an iceberg and sinking, they still put in a whole made-up love story of two kids falling in love. And so it just goes to show that love is one of the most powerful things we could ever experience on this earth. And the Bible is the only book you read where you walk away feeling loved. And God, his love is written in the Bible. It's his love story for you. And so when God made people, and back in the beginning of creation, when he made people, when he was spending time with them in relationship in the garden, when they sinned, they were separated from God, yet his love did not leave them. And he kept making these covenants, and from generation to generation, he kept pursuing humanity until eventually the way was sent. Jesus, the way, the truth, the life, was sent to earth to rescue his people once and for all and unite them in love. And so this relationship with God actually brings us into a relationship of love, because we learn about Christ. We learned that he made the ultimate sacrifice, the ultimate declaration of love by letting his son die on the cross for us. The Apostle John talks about the love of God in the 4th chapter of 1 John, and it says this: "Dear friends, let us love one another, for love comes from God. Everyone who loves has been born of God and knows God. Whoever does not know love does not know God, because God is love. This is how God showed his love among us. He sent his one and only Son into the world that we might live through him. This is love." So John tells us that God is love. And then God personifies it, says that love is in his nature, and then he shows us by sending Jesus. And so when we come to Jesus, we are actually restored to who we were made to be. We can count on God's love because it's not going to let us down. It's reliable. It's a firm foundation for us. And so that brings us to our next point, which is love defines and propels us. And so near the end of Jesus' earthly ministry, he's with his 12 disciples for their last Passover meal together, and he tells them this: "A new command I give you, love one another as I have loved you. So you must love one another. By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples if you love one another." So Jesus is teaching his disciples to love people the way he has loved them. And that is so foundational for us in our faith, that we are recognized and characterized as people who love big, who go the extra mile to love people. And so maybe you've kind of had this experience in the church where it hasn't been love. Maybe you've been burned by the church. You've been hurt by a pastor. And you know what? That is totally valid. And it's really easy to point fingers and get upset or be angry or embarrassed. But there has to come a point where we also look at ourselves too, that we look inward and we see, you know what? Where are my flaws? Where are my blind spots? We're not all perfect. I can forgive for the sake of unity. And also have wisdom and discernment in that you are, taking careful steps as you move forward in healing. And so this Christmas, let's look for ways to unite with others in love, to go the extra mile, to maybe encourage and inspire people and, build each other up. And so on that note, we move to our third point, which is love empowers us to cross the borders. And these are some divided times, aren't they? We've kind of mentioned this before already, but it seems like we have so many reasons this year to be at war with each other, to make it an us versus them problem. And honestly, that's old news. That is something that's been going on since the day Jesus was walking on the earth. We've always had this human problem, this nature, this thing of ours where we just go against each other. We've always had this kind of, inward war. There has always been a divide between the weak and the powerful, the rich and the poor. And so this is why Jesus talks so much about love in his preaching. And it says here in Matthew 5:43, "You have heard that it was said, 'Love your neighbor and hate your enemy.' But I tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you." Jesus didn't only tear down the walls of exclusion, but he also reached across the chasm of separation and exclusion. He befriended tax collectors, and he even invited one of them, Matthew, to be a disciple who ended up writing the book of Matthew. Jesus had so much inclusivity about him and had so much purpose that he saw within people. He spoke to the Samaritan woman at the well, which broke actually multiple societal taboos all at once. The Jews did not associate with Samaritan women, and actually men wouldn't speak to women at that time of the day in public. So many divides that Jesus was just coming through, crossing the borders and uniting people together. Jesus was crossing the divide. He pushed past the spiritual, the cultural, the political, and even the racial divides, and he calls us to do the same. He was illustrating this type of love that John would later describe in 1 John 4 that says, "There is no fear in love, but perfect love drives out fear, because fear has to do with punishment. The one who fears is not made in perfect love." I love the example that Jesus sets. It's so bold. It's so empowering. And when we find our identity in Jesus, we too can live fearless. We can push past the borders. We can go the extra mile to meet people despite differences, despite arguments, despite, all of the things that could possibly disunite us like white trucks. We can move past all of it to love people. And so maybe for you, reaching across the divide starts in your family. It starts in your home. Maybe it's about loving the people in front of you that you spend every day with. Maybe it's quality time. Maybe it's living unity-minded and thinking about this as you're at home, as you're with your family. Before you blow up and get into these disputes, think about what is at stake here. And so maybe reaching across the divide is in your workplace. Maybe it's in your neighborhood. Maybe it's in your community. The point is, we want you to pray about it and really are believing that God's going to put somewhere or someone into your heart where you could build the bridge. And so in love, there's this humility that is willing to put other people first. And God's calling is that we make room for everyone, that we want everyone to come and take part of this, whether we think that they deserve to be there or not. That is humility. And so sometimes love means taking very simple steps of encouraging someone. Maybe it's buying someone's groceries during Christmas. You know how hard it is for people to be managing all these expenses right now? Maybe it's being willing to listen and not be defensive, not try and be a solutionist, but just be there and be present. Maybe it's loving someone else just as equally as God has loved them. Maybe someone is really struggling right now, maybe with some identity. It's our prayer for you that as you go into this last week before Christmas, that you would be conscious of the people around you and look for ways that you can bridge the gap, that we can be all inclusive of others, and just come and worship God, united but socially distant. So let's say a quick prayer. God, I thank you so much for all of the people who are tuning in today, and for those who can't be here, we pray a special blessing over them too. God, we just pray that you would send us out into Kempville, into our communities, and you would show us where we can be the bridge and where we can unite people. And God, we pray for your presence over us this Christmas, that you would just show up like you never have before, that this would be such a memorable time for us in our faith, in our families, in our community together as we stay connected under your name. And so we love you so much, and we'll see you next week. Amen. Hopefully you'll see God more times this week. I'll see you next week. Okay, that's a wrap. Merry Christmas, everyone.